Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff from Core Connection. And this week we are going to get into listening skills that deepen connection. But first, Selina has this week's parenting moment.
Yeah, so we have an adult son that still lives at home. He's working to get on his own. And I realized the other day that I don't ask him to do things that I ask my other children to do. And mainly, I think that's come over the years of I don't, quite frankly, like his response when I ask him to do things. And so more in particular, like babysitting per se, being the responsible adult. My kids are a little older. They don't quite need babysitting, but some still need a responsible adult to watch over them or take in certain places. And so I don't ask him, and I realize I ask my adult children that don't live at home before I ask him. And it's kind of silly, actually, when I think about it. But I had the realization the other day that, it probably actually might hurt his feelings that I don't ask him and I ask outside people, because that to me would convey or communicate to him that I don't trust him or I don't think he's capable. So I realized that even though I don't like his responses still when I don't like how he responds when I ask him to do things, that I probably need to take more opportunity to ask him to do those things in the way that he does it and how he's going to go about doing it, because that would probably help build his confidence and his capability of accomplishing things.
Yeah, that's a tricky situation to be 18, you're graduated from high school, you're still living at home, there's still boundaries. I remember being in that situation with my parents because I had 6 months after I graduated high school until I went to college. And it's interesting. The boundaries there can be tricky, and the dynamics can, I think, feel frustrating to both parties. But yeah, I think largely I agree, because he does still live there, and well, he probably does still want to be as much a part of the family as ever. So good one. Okay, so what to say less of and what to listen for. So real quick, we're just going to recap last week's episode, Talking Less, Connecting More. So we discussed creating space, what to do inside that space, and that listening is not always passive. It's active, intentional, and relational. And then kind of the overarching theme of last week's episode was teens open up when they feel understood, not managed. And it can be a tricky balance because there's still a lot of our teens' lives that we have to manage, right? So there's still a lot of choices they don't necessarily get to make for themselves. Like if they go to school, right, what time they need to be home, there's still a lot of things that we are responsible for. But as much as possible, when we give them the space to make their decisions and to make mistakes and to process their own emotions, they're more likely to be willing to open up to us. So what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to give you some practical skills, right? So lots of examples of how we can help our teens to open up, right? How we can kind of build that connection and help them to want to open up, almost like being a safe space for them. Because I feel like for teens, oftentimes they would rather go to their friends over their parents. I feel like this is a common thing for teens. And there's some developmental normality in that. Friends become very critical to teens, starting around probably age 10 or 11. So tell me your guys' thoughts on this, on ways that we can be that safe space for our teens. And, I want to preface it or right away say we don't want to try to compete with their friends, because we're not going to win. Realistically, we're not likely to win that competition. So what can we do to kind of create this emotional safety with our teens so that they want to come to us, maybe in addition to their friends?
I think that's a great question. And I don't know that we are going to ever be the first priority, but I think the first key to that is building trust. Our kids, we tend to think about, well, we need to trust them to allow them to do things and blah, blah, blah. And we always worry about the trust that they're building or they're not building. But it's also important that they trust us, that they can trust us with things that are maybe a little bit more challenging. And the way we respond has a lot to do with that. And that's why we're going to talk about some of these examples that we have today about kind of the way we respond and making some really small shifts in what we do and what we say and how we respond to maybe even those challenging situations, so that they can feel more confident in coming to us. They're always going to go to their friends too. This is, they're figuring out who they are. They're figuring out their place in the world. And so, they're going to get some information from lots of different places. And we just want one of those to be ours, but we tend to throw advice at our children before they're ready for the advice. And we haven't built that space or that relationship in a way where they want the advice yet. And so the advice actually creates disconnect from our children, and they're not likely to listen to that advice when we just kind of start shoving it down their throats when something's going awry in their lives.
Right. And that temptation to give advice, because darn it, we have so much of it, because we feel like we've lived a lot of life. But I think you're right, Jeremiah. They don't always want it. And to be honest, they don't always need it. Even when we really, really think they do, I think it's okay to ask yourself and to pause and think, do they really need this advice? And more particularly, do they need it right now? Could this advice wait?
Yeah, I think that's an important question to ask ourselves. And we do have lots of advice. And quite frankly, this isn't because we're never going to give our children advice. We're just got to build the relationship and make sure the connection's there so that the advice is welcomed and wanted and listened to. It's more meaningful that way. Whereas when we just dump our advice on them when they don't want it, it's kind of worthless. I promise they're not listening. Like they're not going to take that advice and do anything with it when they don't trust you or they don't have that connection with you.
So let's give an example of when less advice could be a good thing. All right. So, for example, your teen might say, my friends didn't sit with me at lunch. It's really easy to say, okay, so just go sit with someone else. Maybe they're not that great a friend, right? And what could be a better response is to just pause and listen, let them elaborate. And another thing that I love to do when I find my kids are in conflict with their peers is to try to get them to reframe it or ask questions that get them to reframe it, right? So rather than just assuming there's a problem, say, well, okay, do you know why, right? Or do you know what happened? Okay, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that while they're telling you all of these things, and you realize what you're thinking when they're telling you, because it could be something like, this is silly.
Yeah.
But also when they're rambling, you can think, this is not my problem to solve. So that you can just sit back and take, like you said, you can pause and you can realize that it's not your problem to solve. And so therefore you can just use all of that headspace and all of that attention to not fix the problem, but just to listen and understand what they're saying and what they're experiencing.
Yeah, a beautiful response to that could build connection would be something like, oh man, that must be difficult. What did you do? And then now we're elaborating on it, right? And allowing them, like Selina said, to share a little bit more of what's going on for them. The other thought I had about this is that, these are difficult things, but how many times have your kids come home and complained about a friend or a group of friends, and they're so upset with them, and then the next day you're like, they tell you some other story and you're like, but what happened like yesterday? Oh, that's over. And like, we're all best friends again. Right. And so if we start ragging on their friends and, oh, these are terrible friends, go sit with somebody else, go make new friends, that could actually be more problematic. And so sometimes allowing them to work through their own struggles can be pretty powerful.
Yeah. Teens tend to take a lot of identity from their friends. And so when you start to criticize their friends, they often will take that as criticizing them as well, because that's their tribe. That's who they identify with. That's who they want to be a part of. And so when you criticize them, it often feels like, well, I'm friends with them. I'm like them. So you must think that I'm wrong too, or I'm this or that or whatever. And that's not to say that, as Jeremiah pointed out a couple weeks ago, that you don't ever have to have that conversations, because sometimes you do have to point out these friends are not good for you, right? Or these friends are doing this behavior and this isn't okay. But, in general, I think that it's important not to just jump to overtly criticizing your teen's friend group, even if you maybe don't like them, which can be difficult. I totally understand, but it's important just to keep that perspective, that understanding of where your teen is coming from in terms of where they feel like they're fitting in with the world. Okay, so let's shift to say less fixing. So when we try to fix things, as we tend to want to do with teens, it subtly communicates, maybe even not so subtly, but it's saying, I don't think you can handle this, when we just try to jump right to fixing it. Okay, so, they did terrible on a math test. They totally failed, or maybe they're just failing a class in general, or like something academically is just going really wrong. A lot of times we want to jump in like, oh yeah, let's fix that. We're going to work together. We're going to do this, this, and this. Here's the steps. And then you're going to get back to where you want to be. Whereas what we can do is approach it with, okay, so tell me what's going on. What happened? What do you think happened? I mean, like, what happened with this test? Was it an off day, or just like those probing questions, building that connection rather than just jumping straight to solution, asking them, what do they think is the reason behind their failure?
Yeah, it is in our nature to fix.
Yep.
That's what we do, especially as parents. And we've spent their life fixing whatever problems they've come across, right? The baby cries, we fix it. We fix it with a clean diaper or a fresh bottle or whatever the need is. And that translates well into the toddler stage, right? Like, oh, I have an owie on my finger. Okay, well, we fix it. We put a Band-Aid on it or kiss it better, or whatever it looks like, right? And so it's really difficult to make this shift for teenagers to not fix it, to not want to fix it. So, especially when it comes to things like academics, it could be kind of frightening for us as parents when maybe our kids aren't doing as well as we'd hoped they would do. And we want to fix it. I bombed that math test, but I do love your example of just coming to them with something such as, oh man, that must be quite disappointing for you. What do you think was going on there? Why do you think you were struggling with that? And we'll have that conversation. And as it develops and it moves through the paces, eventually what we're going to want to get to is something like, what do you think you might do about it? Instead of us trying to solve the problem, building their confidence in themselves, and helping them discover like what it is that they might do. Well, I could talk to my teacher. They said we could retest. Oh, that's a great idea. So you could talk to your teacher and maybe retest with that. Is there like something that you need to study some more? Is there a principle or a topic you didn't understand that could be helpful for you in improving the grade in the class? We can get into those kinds of conversations instead of like, hey, you know what? I know this guy. He's a great tutor. We're going to get you signed up and we're going to get this taken care of right away. And it's easier for us to fix it, right? Because we probably already know what the best solution might be. And maybe it is a tutor, or maybe it's having a conversation with the teacher. And that's easy for us because we can go, okay, that's done. We've dealt with it. Now we can move on to the next thing that we need to do as a parent. but what does it do for the child? What does it do for their connection? Well, like you said, they're going to start to think that, oh, mom and dad don't think I can handle my problems. And then when, we can go way down the road, right? Like we become adults and we go to college, and all of a sudden, we're bombing a math test, and mom isn't there to call a tutor for us or to, have a conversation with the teacher. You mean I've got to talk to the professor and see what I can do? Mom's always done that for me. So there's a lot of skills here that we're teaching and building connection with our child at the same time.
Okay, let's take a quick break and we will be right back.
Hey, can I share something with you? If leadership has been feeling heavy lately, I see you. Caring so much, holding so much, and still wondering if you're doing it right. That's a lot. And honestly, that's why I created the Lead with Heart Summit. It's not about adding more to your plate. It's about giving you space to breathe, find clarity, and feel more confident in how you lead. I know you're busy, but this is the kind of space that gives you energy back. If you've been needing a reset, I'd love for you to join me. Invest in yourself, invest in your leadership.
Yeah, don't forget the growth opportunity when kids are going through something difficult. We've talked about that before, time and time again, how critical it is and how powerful it is to let a kid struggle and to let them grow. And as parents, it's hard to watch our kids struggle. We don't want to see them in pain. But if you can just hold off, I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised at just how resilient and how strong your kid is, and what a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment they're going to feel of, hey, I did this on my own, and man, it feels good. I was totally failing this class, and you know what? I got my grade up to a B all by myself, and how capable that's going to feel. Okay, so another common parenting pitfall is comparison. And this one, it's another really, really tricky one. And I feel like it's especially tricky between siblings, but we can do it in any direction, right? So like saying things like, well, when I was your age, or well, other kids have it worse. I mean, I feel like the classic one is, well, eat your dinner. There are starving kids in Africa who would love to have this meal. That's not really helpful. Even if there's truth to it, that doesn't necessarily make it helpful. And so comparison, it just doesn't work.
There are appropriate times to share life experiences with your children from your own life and whatnot. Comparing to siblings, comparing to friends always creates problems, and it'll create shame and other issues. It can create problems in the relationship. I have a brother that went through some of that when some things were going on in my teenage years, that he started getting compared to me, and it created some distance between him and I for a while. So comparisons, they're just not helpful. We want to understand what they're experiencing rather than try and say, hey, you should do it this way because this person does it this way, or you should do what I say because I experience this kind of thing. It's just not helpful for them.
It doesn't create connection, and that's our goal, is to create that connection. I think what you're saying is tricky is because you want to connect by being relatable, or I understand, like having that empathy for them because you have experienced those things. But unfortunately, I think it doesn't create the connection in the way that we're wanting to create that connection.
Yeah, because they're the ones going through it. It's not your issue, and teens, for some reason, they just like to be woefully misunderstood. For whatever reason, they seem to derive satisfaction from that. And that doesn't mean that there's not still an opportunity to connect, but I think sometimes they don't want you to understand what they're going through. They don't want to feel understood. They want sympathy. They want that empathy. They want that connection. They want someone to acknowledge, yeah, this is hard, and I can see that it's hard for you. And that is understanding them in a way, but, it's probably in a way that's going to be more palatable to them rather than, yeah, I totally get it. I went through this when I was your age. Again, it's like Selina said, it's just not connecting in the way that we maybe hope that it does.
It almost feels like dismissive instead
Yeah.
of validating.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel like you're being heard or what you're experiencing is valuable or valid. It's just like, oh yeah, I experienced that too.
Mm-hmm.
Seems dismissive.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Okay. Now, one thing that we want to be careful about when we are asking these questions, we are trying to probe, is interrogating. This can be a fine line, right? A lot of times your kid may come to you and, maybe let's go back to the example of my friends didn't sit with me at lunch. Well, what friends didn't sit with there? Well, what did they do instead? And, well, why didn't you do this? Or, like asking too many questions at once. Start simple and say, okay, well, do you want to talk about it? Do you want to tell me what happened? Do you want to get into specifics? And the hard part can be accepting if they say, no, I just want to be alone for a minute, for a while. I just want to sit and kind of just process it. That can be hard to hear, but as we talked about last week, that can be so incredibly powerful to give them that space and that respect to feel their own emotions.
Yeah, and let's be clear about this, because sometimes when I think we talk about questions and asking them curiosity questions, we do move into this interrogator role rather than a curiosity role. And I just want to make sure that we realize that those are different things. So when we start saying things like why create shame and defensiveness, what did you say? Like, that's going to elicit a defensive type response. Or who was there? Something more along the lines of, oh man, that must have been difficult. So now we validated, and now tell me more about what happened. That's more of the curiosity question, right? And do you want to share more? Or like you said, sometimes they're going to say no, they don't want to, and that's okay too. And then kind of respecting that, but letting them know, I'm here if you want to talk more about it. I'd be happy to listen, instead of making them feel like they're, thinking a police interrogation room, like, whoa, like I don't need, 20 questions as to who was there and what they said and how they said it and what they did. When we're getting curious, what we're curious about is more what they're experiencing as a person than exactly what happened and who said what and who did what. Those things are probably going to come out as they talk to you. But what we're trying to understand is, what is this like for them? What do they want to do about it? How do they want to resolve this? Or do they want you to just listen? Or do they want you to resolve the issue? Whatever that looks like in that particular setting.
Yeah. All right. So now when we are having these conversations with our teens and when we are trying to build connection, we want to oftentimes listen for what they might actually be saying. So here are some things that we can listen for, right? So we're trying to maybe use context clues to really understand what our teen is feeling, what they're experiencing, because, you are the expert on your child. And it may not always feel that way, but I promise you are. And so you have this unique ability that other people won't, to really kind of build that connection and to an extent understand what they are going through. So we want to listen for things like maybe emotions that they're feeling, or maybe sometimes they might be making a bid for reassurance. So let's kind of go with that one, right? So like a bid for reassurance, because that can be really important and really easy to miss. So tell me your guys' thoughts on what a bid for reassurance looks like.
Yeah. So, sometimes your kids are going to say something like, oh man, you probably think I'm dumb for doing it this way or that way. We don't want to correct them and be like, no, you're not dumb. But we might say something more like, oh, it sounds like you're worried that I might be disappointed in the way you handled that. And so now we can kind of explore what they're actually experiencing rather than the statement that they're making. Does that make sense to everybody? We're looking at, what are the feelings here? What's happening? Not so much about what's being said. And that's what a lot of good listening skills is going to come to, especially with our children. When we are constantly trying to fix and respond and correct and give advice, we're missing some of these clues that we're going to talk about right now. And we're going to miss what they're not saying. And we're going to go right into other things where we could really dig into some good stuff with them if we can pick up on these cues.
Right. So a really good example of that is what they're not saying. So silence, withdraw, or even sarcasm, that's really good information from a teen. So it's clear that they are experiencing something, and our temptation in those instances is going to be to pursue them, to try to figure it out. What's going on? What's wrong? And we're going to get into fix it mode, when sometimes a better response is going to be just let it lie for a minute, let them process, and just let them know, hey, when you're ready to talk, or if you want to talk, I'm here, and leave it at that.
Yeah, sometimes when a teen storms out and leaves the room, or, kind of removes themselves from wherever you're at, give them some space for a minute. Don't chase them. You're going to come later to them, and give them a few minutes, give them an hour, whatever. And you're going to come to them and say something like, man, that was pretty intense. I'm here if you want to chat about it. And they may say, no, that's okay too. We're just paying attention to those cues. We're building connection here as we have these conversations.
And sometimes too, I feel like we can mistake, like when a teen storms out of a room, well, how dare you walk away from me, or you don't get to disrespect me like that. And I'm not saying that, teens can't be disrespectful in those instances, but sometimes when they're just walking away or removing themselves from a situation, they're saying, I'm heated, I need an out. And, there could be a really great opportunity for the correction after the connection of, hey, I don't mind that you got overheated and that you needed an out. Next time, I need you to be more respectful, right? So again, it's not that you can't offer that correction, but that correction is going to come much, much better if there's been a connection first.
Yeah, timing is really important.
Yeah. Okay, so let's briefly, in closing, go over the 4 core listening skills, right? So we're going to reflect, right? So like we're going to repeat their emotions, and then you're going to validate them. You're going to clarify, and then you're going to invite. Now, I think it's important to note, you may not always get to all 4 of these, and that's okay. These aren't steps to have a perfect conversation and a perfect way to build connection and to get your teen to open up with you. These are just some things to work on, to work towards, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about what each of those mean just for a moment. If we look at reflect, what we're doing is we're saying, we're reflecting feelings, right? Like, man, you're really frustrated about that, or that must have been really difficult. Then we're going to validate those feelings, right? Oh, yeah, that must be really tough when you failed that class. Like, dang, that's hard. Or, hey, am I understanding you right? Now we're getting into clarifying, right? Like, am I understanding what you're sharing with me? You're telling me that, XYZ happened and that you're really upset about it because you didn't think this person should have said this or done this, right? That's clarifying. And then we invite, and what we're doing in the invitation piece is inviting more information, right? More curiosity. Is there more that you haven't told me? Is there something else about the situation you still want to talk about? That's the invitation piece. And these are great listening skills that can go a long ways with us and our relationships with our children.
And another thing to be prepared for is, just because it doesn't go the way you want doesn't mean it necessarily failed. So you could be trying to do these things and your teen could still just come at you with, everything is just broken, and maybe they just storm away crying. It doesn't mean that you did it wrong, or it doesn't mean that, this isn't effective. It just means that, well, in this moment, it may not be what your teen needed right now. Maybe what they needed is space. So, again, these things aren't ways to be the perfect parent. These things are ways that can help build the connection with your teen. Because parenting, as I've said many times before, it's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about trying to do a little bit better today than you did yesterday.
Well, I think that even if they respond that way and storm off or respond differently than you think that they should be, when you are reacting and and working on how the way that you are showing up. I still feel like there's progress there. I still feel like that they're going to recognize and they're going to start to see and they're going to begin to trust that this is how you're going to respond and this is how you're going to react and this is how you're going to be for them. So I don't think, even if they're not showing up how you think they should be, that you messed up or it didn't work or something like that, because the work is there and the work is being done, and it's going to, over time, you're going to be able to see and interact in those ways. And if anything, you personally are going to feel that peace and calm the way that you want it to be for you.
Yeah, I love that Selina brought that piece up, because it's so important. And I think it's a good time to remind ourselves that this work that we're doing as parents, it's a process, and we can't control our children and how they act and react. What we do get to control is ourselves. And through all of it, we're modeling, we're developing, we're creating. And yes, we're making mistakes all along the way, and mistakes are okay. It's not the end of the world when we make a mistake. It's just that we made a mistake, and we can fix those and correct those things. And in those mistakes is sometimes some of the greatest parenting moments that will ever exist.
Yeah. Okay. So next week we are going to get into when to speak up and be clear instead of quiet. And we will see you all then. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.